So hello to everyone. I am Theresa Mayes. I'm a dietitian here at Cincinnati Children's, and on behalf of the Spina Bifida Coalition of Cincinnati, I'd like to welcome all of you to the inaugural session of NOURISH. So NOURISH is an acronym for nutritious cooking, budgeting, and preparing recipes for sustaining health. And this program has been sponsored by the Elsa Sue Foundation as well as Kroger. And I'm very excited to be a part of this with all of you. I have about 8 to 10 people in front of me who were recruited by the Spina Bifida Coalition of Cincinnati. And you're going to be embarking with me as well as Kayla Hansman, who's a dietitian. She'll be teaching a couple of the classes in the upcoming year, as well as Meg Galvin, who's the certified executive chef. But over the course of the next year, we hope to help you improve your nutrition education and hopefully impact not only how you look at food, but how you purchase food, budget for food, and how you take all of that knowledge and apply it to your meal preparation to ultimately improve your health. Again, NOURISH is this nutrition education program for adults with spina bifida. This is a 4-part series. We're going to be meeting once a quarter over the next year, and we're going to be encouraging improved eating behaviors by teaching targeted components of nutrition while demonstrating the skills necessary to safely make simple and healthy meals at home. The 4 topics that we plan to cover, the first of one is tonight, vitamins, minerals, and protein, and why that's important, why those nutrients are important. The second session will have the topic of low-calorie meals, and then we'll move on, I believe, in the spring to fiber, and then in the summer we're going to talk about hydration. So all of these topics are specific to adults living with spina bifida, and we targeted these specific topics for that particular reason. So again, NOURISH and the review of nutrients for good health is what we are planning to discuss tonight. And I'm going to be talking about vitamins, minerals, and proteins. And again, I'm Theresa. So first of all, I wanted to start out and talk about the purpose of good nutrition. Why are we even here, and why does it even matter? And that would be because eating a balanced diet is a vital component of our well-being and our good health. So food provides our bodies with energy, with protein, essential fats, vitamins, minerals, nutrients that we need to live and to be healthy. For young children, it's important for growing, but for us, it's important for our bodies to function properly and to fight any disease process as well. So we need a variety of foods to provide the right amount of nutrients for good health, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So I don't want to get too technical, but I do want you to understand that there's big nutrient parts of our diet, and then there's these small nutrient parts of our diet. So macronutrients and micronutrients. And the big nutrients when we eat food, the big nutrients, and these are the calorie-containing nutrients, are carbohydrate, fats, and protein. Micronutrients are vitamins and minerals. And we're going to talk about each sets, the macro and the micronutrients. I'm not going to go through all the micronutrients because there's like 64 different vitamins and minerals, and we'll be here, for a very long time. But ones that are very specific to living with spina bifida and why it's important. So just to summarize some of the macronutrients and the big purposes of the macronutrient, number 1, carbohydrate. When we eat breads and cereals and pastas and that kind of thing, the big benefit we get from that is energy. So when you think carbohydrates, you think energy, and energy is what all of us need in this room to get out of bed every day, to be sitting here and have energy for our brains to work, to have energy for our bodies to move, just to get through the day. So carbohydrate is the big energy source for our body. And carbohydrates come from, again, the starchy type foods, so breads and pastas, and rice would be another one. And then there's also more starchy fruits and vegetables, so potatoes and corn and bananas and honey's on here, dried fruits, pretzels, those kinds of things. So anything that's grain based in the bread group would be a carbohydrate. You get energy from that. And then any type of starchy fruit or vegetable, largely fruits. And then moving on to the other macronutrient, fat. Fat is also a source of energy for our bodies, but it's more for long term. So we eat, too many calories. We store that as fat, and our body uses that during times when we don't have that short term carbohydrate available to us. So, and if you ever are short on carbohydrates or short on calories, you burn fat, and that's when you lose weight. So ultimately, that's where we would all like to get to that point if we need to lose weight to get to the point that we're burning our fat stores. But energy, it does provide an energy source for in the long term. It's also an important part of cell structure and hormones in our body. It assists with the absorption of certain vitamins. So it's important, and it also helps with our body temperature to have some fat lining. But it's important to remember too that this is having a diet high in fat, and we'll talk about this, the different types of fat. Fat is is more highly caloric than your carbohydrate source, or when we talk about protein here in a minute, it's more highly caloric than the other macronutrients. It's also important the type of fat. If you've heard about trans fats and saturated fats versus polyunsaturated fats, it can be very confusing. But knowing that typically if you're eating fast foods or cakes and pastries, deep fried foods, those are going to have kind of the bad fat in them. And I'm going to tell you why trans fats are bad here in a minute, or quote, not bad. I don't like to use the word bad, but they're less healthy. And the same with saturated fats, they're less healthy. And those foods typically come from animal fats. So any high fat meats or the skin of chicken, or if you see visible fat in a meat, generally that's going to be a saturated fat. And also other types of vegetable fats are higher in saturated fat, coconut oil, palm oil, that kind of thing. Dairy foods like the cream and dairy is also more saturated. There's also, then moving on to the more positive fat, that would be unsaturated fats. All of these have the same calories, but they're processed by our bodies in a little bit different way. So if we are going to have a little fat in our diet, again, emphasis little, unsaturated fat or unsaturated sources would be better for us. So typically olive oil, canola oil, peanut oil, the nutrients, or excuse me, the oils listed on the far right. Nuts are good sources of unsaturated fats, and avocado as well. They still have a lot of calories, but we have to balance that with, we all have fat in our diet. I mean, it's just normal for us to do that. Ideally, we want small amounts of fat and unsaturated. And the reason for that is, in looking at the trans fats, the difference between the trans and the saturated and the poly, the trans fats actually raise our bad cholesterol, the LDL cholesterol, and lower your good cholesterol. So it's all about keeping yourself healthy. And so avoiding those trans fats typically found in pastries and fast food and those kinds of foods. It also can increase your risk of developing heart disease and stroke. And it's also associated with a higher risk of developing diabetes, type 2 diabetes. So the trans fats are something that all of us in this room should be limiting in our diet. And the same with saturated fats. Pretty much they have the same type of effect on your body. They raise your lower density, your LDL cholesterol levels. So they're raising the things that you want to actually be lowering, and they also raise your risk of heart disease and diabetes. So those are the two fats, again, the trans fats and the saturated fats we want to have less of in our body. Unsaturated fats can actually help to improve the good cholesterol in your body. So the unsaturated fats, if you remember, were the canola oil and the olive oil and the avocado, the different types of nuts. Those are all good sources or healthy fats for your body. And they can also help to control blood sugar levels. So we're finding that unsaturated fats actually have a positive effect on your health. But moving on to the big nutrient we want to talk about tonight and why it's important for all of us in the room would be protein. So protein is another calorie source for our bodies. It's important for maintaining our cell structure, helps to keep our muscles and our organs functioning. So there's protein in every organ of your body, in your heart, in your liver, in your kidneys, in your skin. Keeping all that healthy is important, is an important role of protein in our diets. It helps with hormones. One of the big jobs of protein would be to help keep your immune system up so that you can fight infection. And, we're moving kind of into cold and flu season, and this would be have an important role. Making sure you have enough protein in your diet is going to keep you healthy to fight infections. Wound healing as well. If this could be from a cut that you got, doing something silly at home, or it could be, maybe a wound created from a pressure sore potentially. It could be a surgical wound healing. So you've had a surgery and there's a surgical incision that needs to heal. All of that would benefit from protein. So all of those types of sores and wounds would benefit from more protein. And then for young children, protein is important for health. But the big things, the big properties of protein that would help in spina bifida would be the immune system as well as wound healing. Talking about good protein sources, and I realized the avocado error way after I made the slides, and I couldn't figure out how to change it. So it's avocado. But anyway, avocado is a fruit which actually has a small amount of protein in it, but largely protein is coming from your dairy and your meats in most diets. There's some in nuts and eggs, and a little bit in, I think we have the hummus here tonight, the chickpeas, spinach, beans, those kinds of things largely are going to come from meat and dairy. And so taking into account that we may need to watch calories, in the previous slide that fat is a little bit more calorically dense, and we all need to kind of keep track of how many calories we're eating, or watch the amount of calories we're eating. Choosing a low-fat cheese or low-fat yogurt or low-fat dairy or low-fat meats would benefit all of us. So lower fat cuts of meat. So moving on to vitamin A. Vitamin A is an important nutrient because, again, it's going to assist with wound healing. It's also going to help to build up our immune systems to help us fight infection. And you're going to find that there's overlap in these different nutrients that we're going to talk about. Vitamin A has a role in vision, so it's keeping our eyes healthy. And it also has antioxidant properties. So antioxidant properties are important because they can actually assist in prevention of diseases down the road. So it takes a lot of time for cancers and heart disease, dementia, liver disease, things you think about that may be happening sort of later in life, but there's vitamin A can actually have a protective effect against some of those really bad disorders. And again, this is the kind of thing I wanted you to not worry about having to take notes on, because you're going to see lots of pictures of different foods. But when I think of vitamin A sources, I'm thinking of largely orange type foods come to mind. So that's why you're seeing like the carrots and the sweet potatoes and the apricots. Peaches could be on here. Pumpkins are all very high in vitamin A. Really any kind of squash, yellow squash would be in this category as well. There's some kale on there, the egg, the yolk of the egg, broccoli, spinach. There's even some liver. Does anybody eat liver these days? We have one person in the room that eats liver, 2 people eat liver. So yes, great vitamin A source. Moving on to the B vitamins. The B vitamins work in combination with the carbohydrates that we talked about earlier to help with energy production. They also help with hormones and brain function and all, again, moving on to that, down to the bottom of the list, the antioxidants. So the B vitamins are also helpful to prevent against these diseases, prevention of cancer, heart disease, dementia, etc. And I'm not going to go over all of these, but just know, I want you to kind of just look at these foods. I think the theme of tonight, when I kind of flash these foods in front of you or show you the words of foods, is to just look at the different varieties. So we are looking at all kinds of foods across the board that kind of work collectively to make sure that you get good protein in your diet, good fat in your diet, good, different vitamins that we're going to talk about, good protein, all of that, kind of collectively looking at the foods that are on the board and thinking about, am I eating these right now? Could I possibly include a little bit more of those in my diet, a little less of that in my diet? So kind of kind of do some introspection here and think about kind of what you're doing right now, and are these foods a normal part of your diet? And in a looking at, I want you to begin to look at foods in a different way, looking at them more as functional, that these foods and have vitamins and minerals and carbohydrates and fats and proteins in them that are actually going to be helpful for your body. That food can be used to keep you healthy, and kind of not only be used to, I'm hungry, what can I eat, but how can I make it not only enjoyable, but how can I make it useful for my body? Kind of looking at food a little different. So B vitamins, again, different foods that there's a number of B vitamins, and I'm not going to go through each one, but just know that B vitamins, B1, B2, B3, B5, and we go on to the next one, B7, B9, B12. So there's quite a number of B vitamins that our body needs for different functions, and they're found in a variety of different foods. Vitamin C also has that antioxidant property, another overlap that's going to help to prevent different diseases, and also has an immune component, so it's going to keep our body healthy and help us fight infection. And also it helps with iron absorption. So if anyone would happen to have low iron and is on iron, sometimes the doctor will tell you to drink that with orange juice, because it's going to help the iron be absorbed, because there's quite a bit of vitamin C in orange juice. Wound healing is also important, an important effect from vitamin C. Vitamin C helps wounds to heal, and oftentimes if you were to have a wound, in particular like a pressure ulcer, oftentimes you'll have to go on, or your doctor may put you on vitamin C, because they know that it's the correlation with wound healing is large. So vitamin C foods, when I think of vitamin C, I think largely of citrus. So I mentioned the orange juice, or oranges, limes, lemons, also red peppers, red or green, just any kind of bell pepper, broccoli, tomatoes, pears, grapes, cabbage, cantaloupe. I feel like I'm just talking and they're on the screen, but again, wide variety. I also want you to notice color. So lots of color in the diet kind of helps to make sure that you're getting all of these vitamins. When I think of orange, I'm thinking vitamin A. When I think vitamin C, I'm also thinking orange, but just generally lots of color will help you cover lots of different vitamins and minerals in your diet. Moving on to vitamin D. So vitamin D is a big nutrient that helps to strengthen bones as well as teeth. And if you've heard of vitamin D before, sometimes it's called the sunshine vitamin, because the body can actually make it from being exposed to the sun as well. So most of us who live in this part of the country where we are moving into this, the Midwestern part of the country, where we're moving into time of year in the winter and into the early spring where there's not a lot of sun, a lot of us can develop vitamin D deficiency, or if we don't have enough in our diet, in general, we can develop vitamin D deficiency. So it's important to remember that we can get some from the sun, but we also need, especially during the times when the sun's not around, or when we, even sunblock can affect our exposure to sunlight, and it should. I'm not saying we shouldn't use sunblock for sure, but just a short amount of time in the sun, 10 minutes in the sun with your arm out the window as you're driving or as you're a passenger, can give you enough vitamin D in the day, 10 to 15 minutes. But not recognizing that the sun's not always available to us as a source, we need to make sure we have enough in our diet. And we'll talk about that because it's so important for bones and keeping our bones hard. So if you are the simple act of bearing weight helps to keep our bones hard. And if you are someone with spina bifida who is unable to bear weight, vitamin D and also calcium become extremely important in your diet, because you're kind of missing one factor which will help to keep your bones hard. So you're going to have to make it up almost in your calcium and your vitamin D to really stay on top of your bone health. So it's going to strengthen your bones and teeth, also improve your immunity, helping you to fight infection. And recently there's been this role in helping vitamin D and helping to maintain and lower blood sugar. So it's an important piece of many folks who have diabetes as a secondary concern. And then also, if you've heard of vitamin D, along with that sunshine vitamin theme, assists with positive mood. So some folks find that if their vitamin D levels are low, if by simply bringing the vitamin D levels up, you can assist your mood. It can be a more positive mood, and there's an association between vitamin D and depression, low vitamin D and depression. So some good vitamin D sources would be eggs and cheese and salmon and mushrooms, and different foods are also fortified with vitamin D. So you might see in the grocery store orange juice fortified with vitamin D. Cereals are fortified with a number of vitamins, vitamin D being one of them, and milk is also fortified with vitamin D. Many folks, though, in this part of town, I shouldn't say part of town, Midwestern area, who don't have access to the sun often need to be on a vitamin D supplement. Moving on to vitamin E. Vitamin E is not one that folks in America are largely deficient in. It's found in a large variety of foods that it's common in the American diet. But again, emphasizing the role of vitamin E, again, in prevention of disease. It improves our mental function, improves immunity, once again, helping prevent infection and disease that way. And it also assists with red blood cell production. And red blood cell is important because that's where red blood cells are our oxygen carrier, and we want to make sure we have good oxygen to keep us with an improved mental function. Vitamin E-rich foods, eggs and corn and oil, olive oil and other oils, fish, peppers, broccoli, nuts, kiwi, peanuts, nuts, avocado. Vitamin K is I always tend to leave vitamin K out, but vitamin K has always been known for its blood clotting properties. So it's important if you do get that cut or have any kind of wound and you do have a bleed, which we all do, vitamin K is important to have enough of that in our bodies so that we actually can clot blood so that it doesn't continue to bleed and bleed and bleed. It also, though, the thing that I like about kind of new research is showing that vitamin K is important also to help keep our bones strong. So again, that the idea of keeping bones strong in all adults is important, adults and kids, but especially if you are not weight bearing, it's going to be especially important. So keeping track of vitamin K in your diet. And if you look largely at the screen, I see a lot of green. So if you are eating most green foods, you probably are covered with vitamin K in your vitamin K intake. It's very hard to be vitamin K deficient, but it's important to pay attention, again, to the colors in your diet. Moving on to minerals. So we're through the macronutrients and the vitamin portion of the micronutrients. But iron is important, again, for red blood cell production, red blood cells being our oxygen carrier. So we want to make sure that we have enough iron in our diet so that we have enough oxygen available to us to keep us having energy, and oxygen is important for wound healing. Again, an important part of having iron in your diet. And this is a busy slide, but iron is readily available to the American diet. I mean, generally, it's really hard unless you are avoiding red meats. And I don't know how many of you would be avoiding red meats, but it's important to have red meats in your diet, low-fat red meats at least a few times a week. It is possible to be vegan and get enough iron, but you just have to work a little harder to make sure that you have enough of the different fruits and vegetables and grains in your diet, which would give you enough iron in your diet. And legumes are an important piece for iron, an important source of iron, different vegetables. So I'm not going to go through each one of these, but again, knowing that this is a resource that's available to you, just kind of looking through this list kind of in hindsight after we're done, and just kind of say, well, what on this list is in my diet pretty routinely? And is there anything on here that could contribute to my iron intake? Because iron's a really big part of the diet, keeping your energy levels up, and again, for wound healing. Additionally, calcium is important, again, from the point of strengthening bones and teeth. Calcium also helps muscle contraction. So if you are doing PT or just working with PT or just being able to move in general, calcium is an important part of moving. And it also helps to keep our blood vessels healthy. And calcium-rich foods, I largely think of the dairy group, so milk and cheese and yogurt, if you do that, and then also eggs are in here, and some of the green leafies are in here, and nuts are in here, potatoes, mushrooms, broccoli, soybeans, kind of going around the picture. But I largely think, when I think calcium, I think dairy foods. Zinc, I believe, is the last nutrient for review, but it is important for wound healing and also immunity. And it also has a role in carbohydrate as well as protein metabolism. So having enough zinc in your diet is important. The thing about the nutrients for wound healing, I want to make the point that keeping your body kind of stocked in these nutrients, kind of by the foods that you eat, not only help to heal a wound, but they also help potentially in preventing wounds. So making sure you have good nutrition has a role in actually the prevention of like pressure sore type wounds. So zinc is found in some whole grain flour, wheat germs, sunflower seeds, carrot, spinach, rice, etc. So again, not so much making sure that you kind of remember all of these foods. Like this group, or the foods on this slide have zinc, and the foods on the previous slide have calcium. I want this talk actually to almost be like a resource for you to go back and make sure that you kind of are having some of these foods in your diet, so that you can really pay attention to the nutrients that are found in foods, so that you can just better your health. So there is a resource available on the internet, myplate.gov. And I'm going to review it just a little bit tonight, but there is a ton of information on this website that may help you as you embark on kind of making better choices for yourself in the food category. But myplate.gov kind of touts itself by having variety in your diet. So when you make your plate, when you have your dinner or your lunch, we want to make sure that the plate has variety in it. Variety in color. So the plate kind of reminds us, with the different colors, the green, the red, the blue, the grain or the brown, excuse me, that we want to have color in our diet. And that if you look at the left-hand side of the plate, at least half of your plate should be fruits and vegetables when you eat. So that's kind of a reminder to us all that a large portion of our diet, to make sure that we get these good nutrients in our diet, should come from fruits and vegetables. There should be about 30% of your intake as grains, carbohydrates, and then about 20% of your plate should come from protein. And protein is largely the meats, or it could be a bean, and then always including a dairy to make sure you get that calcium in. So it doesn't necessarily have to be milk. When I see this picture, I think of milk on the side, but it could be a dairy that comes in the form of, cheese, or it could be a little yogurt, or it could be maybe cottage cheese, etc. There should be a dairy in your diet. So just to recap kind of the big nutrients in summary for some of the key components related to spina bifida. So wound healing, as well as the potential for wound prevention. Again, protein is important in your diet, vitamin A, vitamin C, zinc, and iron. All of those are important. For immunity, keeping yourself kind of in the best possible condition to kind of prevent infection would be protein, vitamin A, the B vitamins, pretty much everything we talked about tonight, C, D, E, zinc, and iron. All of those are important for immunity. So kind of beginning to think of foods and the nutrients they provide in a different way, that actually I can, probably help to build up my immune system and keep me healthy by the foods that I eat. And nutrients for bone health, again, protein, calcium, vitamin D, and the new one to the group would be vitamin K. So in a little while, we are going to go with Chef Meg, and the menu tonight is concentrating on bone health. And she is going to help you, and she's going to prepare and help you prepare salmon patties, which are a good source of protein, calcium, and vitamin D. All of these things are good for bones. There's going to be a yogurt dressing, which also has some protein and calcium, good for bones. Potatoes, which have some calcium and vitamin K. Leeks, how about that one? Calcium and vitamin K. Who's had leeks in the room? Couple of people. Red peppers have some vitamin C, not so much for bones, but for taste and color tonight. And mushrooms. And mushrooms are a good source of calcium and vitamin D. I'm not sure if folks know that, but I don't think largely of mushrooms as having that, but it definitely does. So tonight's menu is all about eating foods that are good for your bones, largely bones. So the key point of my piece of this education component tonight is that to help you begin to look at foods as functional. So most of us think of food as, okay, I'm hungry, I'm just going to go eat to fill my hunger. Or maybe you think of food as a social, it's largely a piece of our social lives is eating out or eating with friends or eating with family. But food, kind of thinking of it in a different light, is actually the food and the nutrients that they provide actually have function within our body. And you can kind of use variety in which food groups they're coming from, variety in color, variety in textures. So, a raw vegetable versus a cooked vegetable, making sure that obviously the raw vegetable would have more nutrients in it and more nutrients available to your body versus a cooked vegetable. So that having like harder textures in your body or in your foods would be important to make sure that you're kind of getting a mix of all of these different nutrients. You can use myplate.gov as a guide to help you with your planning. Again, making sure that your plate is at least half fruits and vegetables and about 30% from the grain, a little bit of dairy, and about 20% of some protein source. And just knowing that a little planning can go a long way. And that's really also what tonight is about with Chef Meg, kind of doing a little meal planning and really thinking about what foods am I eating, and is this going to provide a variety of color and texture, and is to make sure that I am getting all of my nutrients in. I kind of wanted to put a little side note here because it's something that as Americans, I think we largely could potentially be deficient in our vitamin Z, also known as sleep. So for adults, and I see honestly, I see sleep as a vitamin. As a dietitian, I think we need to be touting this a little bit more because without enough sleep, our bodies can't use all these good nutrients, and we can't heal ourselves if we have a wound, or we can, but it's going to take longer. Sleep is very much linked to disease. So if you're not sleeping well, you could potentially give yourself, place yourself at heightened risk for heart disease and stroke and high blood pressure and all these things. So sleep is very important to keep our health, and it really has much of the same role as a vitamin. So that's why I like to call it a vitamin, even though I don't know that the medical profession would say that. That's why it's my made-up vitamin. But I did want to, it's so important that I actually wanted to spend a little time on it by just talking about how ways to improve sleep for all of us in the room, to go to bed, usually at the same time every night, even on the weekends and holidays, if possible. Avoid drinking caffeine in the afternoon and evening as possible. Avoid large meals right before bed, and that's going to help from a weight standpoint as well. You want at least a couple of hours before eating and bedtime. And creating a bedtime routine that helps you relax and wind down. So whether that's give examples here, a warm bath or shower reading, listening to music, dimming the lights, etc. And one more full page. Avoiding long naps in the afternoon. I think doctors are recommending, that small naps are okay, but those long naps can really interfere with getting good sleep at night. Turning off the electronics 30 minutes before bed. The light from those actually can have an effect on your sleep. So, sleeping without the TV, without the video games, etc., at least 30 minutes ahead of time. And managing stress, taking breaks when you need to, laughing with friends, write down what's on your mind. And I added the big one that we're doing tonight, meal planning might help you sleep a little better. So, all right. So I am done with my portion, but I really want to entertain questions at this point. If anyone around the table has any questions, I threw a lot of information at you, but again, it will be available. There's different foods in the video, within the video will be available to you. So the question is, for eating out, what's a good rule of thumb for keeping the ratios that are suggested by the myplate.gov? And I think most restaurants do advertise their menus online. So having access to that, if you do a little planning and know where you're going at ahead of time, you can look at their menus ahead of time, rather than being under the a short time when you have the waitress waiting on your order and you can only look for a short minute. But doing a little bit of planning ahead of time and seeing what's on their menu, and making sure that you make choices. That most restaurants, more and more restaurants are coming on board with offering fruits and vegetables on their menu. It depends on the type of restaurant, but generally, doing that planning, I think I would recommend that as much as you can. Anything else? The question is the difference between frozen and fresh vegetables. So there really is a cascade as far as the amount of nutrients that are available to you. When you talk about a cooked, we'll just talk about a vegetable, like a cooked vegetable to a frozen vegetable to a fresh vegetable. A cooked vegetable is going to have less nutrients available to you, because in that cooking process, some of those vitamins and minerals do oxidize or break down, so they're not available to you. Frozen and fresh are really on the top levels of the hierarchy. Fresh would be ideal, but frozen is definitely a good option, a good second best. So definitely, if it's easier, and Meg may talk to this as well, but a lot of vegetables are increasingly available, already chopped up and available and frozen, and and those would be great resources for you to use in your cooking. Yes. So the question is there a connection between vitamin D and calcium? And yes, you do need to have good vitamin D stores in order for calcium to be absorbed. So if you are eating calcium that doesn't necessarily have vitamin D in it, so for example, yogurt, if it's not fortified with vitamin D, is a good calcium source, but it generally doesn't have vitamin D in it, or it might have a small amount. So you want to make sure that you are getting enough vitamin D in your diet, either or from the sun, to make sure that calcium in the yogurt can be absorbed. But yes, you are definitely right. Yes. So the question is that true of milk as well? And most milk, I'm in the United States, I almost want to say all milk, cow's milk in the United States is fortified with vitamin D. So, and many people call vitamin D milk the whole milk, but there's the same amount of vitamin D in whether it's skim milk, 1%, 2% whole milk. So it's kind of a misnomer, or the country has been misled. So there's the same amount of vitamin D in what some folks call vitamin D milk, which is whole milk. But, okay. Any other questions? You guys are awesome.